Okay, welcome everyone. This is the March edition of the Texas Space Authority's T5 webinar, as we call them, the TPA's third Thursday at 2 training series. And today, the focus is going to be on solar and how solar projects can be incorporated into PACE and how PACE can provide financing that matches up well with the nature of a solar project. We are joined today by a couple of guest presenters. With the Texas Solar Energy Society, and then also one of the local chapters, a practitioner, and we're pleased to have them to add to what normally I would cover on this type of webinar. So with that, let me just get started. Our presenters today: myself, Doug Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Texas Space Authority. Pete Parsons, who's the Executive Director of TexSES, the Texas Solar Energy Society. I've known Pete for many years. She has a long history in clean energy policy, local government support, a variety of different areas in her background that support what she's doing now with TexSES. And then Jason Pittman, who is the president and the co-founder of Go Smart Solar, a solar installer based in San Antonio, doing a lot of work in the community solar area. So again, we're pleased to have them join us today. And as far as the agenda, what we're going to cover, and I'll say this in case you are making notes or making trying to record this, we will have this recorded afterwards. We'll send you a link. It will be on the Texas Space Authority's YouTube channel, so you can watch the webinar later if you need to, or pass it along to colleagues. That's an option. So we'll have that, so you can just listen today, and then you can watch later if you need to, or pass that along. So the agenda, we're going to talk about a little bit: what is PACE, where is it, why it makes sense in a number of cases for financing. Talk about the Texas Solar Energy Society. Pete will cover that. Go into the project mechanics. Jason will cover that. Then I'm going to circle back into PACE specifics, eligibility, project roles and participants, look at some case studies for PACE financing in Texas that have involved solar, and then provide you some resources. I'll try to monitor questions. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box as we go. And if something comes up as a speaker is speaking that is pertinent, I may stop and try to respond to that question then. If not, we'll get to those at the end. And if we run out of time, we'll provide our emails, and certainly you'll have an opportunity to follow up later. So with that, what is PACE? PACE is an acronym that's used a lot for property assessed clean energy. And the part that's missing there is the F, the financing, but I guess that would make an awkward acronym. So we just say PACE. And it's a simple way of paying for projects that have a high initial capital cost, but with no money out of pocket. And the key to that is the savings or the avoided costs that these projects create really become the debt service mechanism for repayment. So long-term 100% financing for energy efficiency, water conservation and distributed energy projects. It's for commercial properties in Texas, including nonprofits, so houses of worship. The very first project in Texas was actually at a temple. For industrial, including manufacturing, agricultural, multifamily residential, so anything with 5 units or more, but nothing smaller than that. So an apartment complex is eligible. And the key to this all is it's repaid via a special property assessment that is there on the property over the useful life of the improvements. So you're aligning the savings or the avoided costs with the useful life of the improvements, rather than having to pay for them all right up front or finance them over a shorter period of time. It's state authorized, Chapter 399 of the Local Government Code, created under state law in 2013. It's voluntary in Texas, an open market, meaning that local governments create these programs at the local level. Property owners can participate, but it's not a regulatory approach. It's not a mandate. It's essentially a market structure, a mechanism that allows for this type of financing. Local governments, again, they adopt this at the local level, one by one, and then nonprofit administered. Most local governments figured out real quick that they did not really want to set up a PACE division or a PACE department. And so our organization the Texas PACE Authority was formed. And so we are a nonprofit. This is all we do. We finance, we administer the PACE programs, really serving on as the local government's extended staff. So they're our clients. We work for them. We work with property owners. We work with service providers, and then the capital providers that provide the funding. So we do not provide any funding. That's kind of a common misconception. We're not a bank. We're not a capital provider. We're the ones that kind of work with all of the parties to facilitate a project, and again, backstop and provide these services for local governments. In Texas, our model is that PACE is adopted locally, so usually at the county level, in some cases the city level. Currently, we have 55 local PACE programs that cover about 60% of the state's population. If you go to our website and you click on any of these counties, you'll see the projects that are in those counties and any specifics for those particular counties or cities. So the map is filling up. We have many more counties and cities, but we're covering quite a bit of where the activity in the population is currently. And PACE is growing. As I mentioned, authorized in 2013, got a start, kind of the first projects in 2016. 2019 was a big jump. Last year, in spite of COVID, we actually closed more projects than in any prior year. They tended to be smaller, but a lot of activity still in spite of COVID. And already this year, we've closed a number of projects just since January 1st. So there seems to be kind of a better understanding, maybe an inflection point where this as a financing tool is better understood by property owners. So 146 million of investment today facilitated. And as you can see in the pie chart, most of that's in the C&I space, commercial retail, commercial office, hotel, lodging, a little bit industrial, some nonprofit, but certainly mostly commercial at this point. And as far as the projects that are being financed, about half are energy efficiency, about a third water conservation, and then 12% distributed generation, and those are all PV. So that's kind of the breakout. And again, kind of why does this make sense, and why is it something to evaluate if you were a property owner? The key to this is it is a way to improve your properties in a budget neutral or a cash flow positive way. And if you look at the two graphs here on the left, under a conventional financing scenario, if you were to knock on your lender's door, your bank's door, and say, I need to borrow money, for an energy efficiency project, for a solar project, typically they would consider this an unsecured loan, equipment loan, because in the event of a default, they're probably not going to remove the equipment. There may be limited resale value, salvage value for that equipment. And so typically the term standard equipment loans about 5 years. So all of the repayment, and again, this is under the conventional scenario, occurs up front. But the savings or the benefit from the project accrue over a very long time. These are inherently kind of long-lived measures. Solar installations, 20, 25 years, HVAC systems, 15 to 20 years, lighting, 10, 15 years. So you're upside down financially for that first portion because all of that repayment happens there. What makes PACE different is because this is a assessment secured financing mechanism, a lender or a capital provider is willing to extend the financing term so that it equals the useful life of the equipment. And so that means that if you look at the graph on the right, these are structured so that your debt service, your payment is equal to or less than the utility savings or the avoided costs, so you're cash positive day one. So this is really kind of the key difference between conventional and PACE financing. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to our two guest presenters today. And first, we'll hear from Pete Parsons, who is Executive Director of the Texas Solar Energy Society. Moving on to her slide, and Pete, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Deb, for having me today. Deb and I've actually, as he mentioned, he and I've known each other for quite a few years now. And we're now very fortunate to have Deb on our board. He's one of our board of directors. Next slide. Next slide, Deb. There we go. Of course, we all look forward to a day when we are living in a 100% clean energy society. And it is our desire and intention to be an educational organization that provides resources for fact-based information and inspires folks to consider installing solar on their projects. This is our mission and vision here. Next slide. So Texas is a nonprofit. We're a 501c3. We're a member of the American Solar Energy Society, and we have 5 chapters in our state: Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, Houston, and Dallas. They're fabulous. They all do very different things. And it's our job to aid them in the promotion of their mission and vision, as well as helping them identify grants and coordinate efforts between the chapters, as well as promote their best practices. So next slide, please. So we're now a year into COVID, and despite the challenges that we had last year, we actually did get some things done. We welcomed El Paso as our 5th chapter, and we took our annual Cool House tour, which is one of our big fundraisers. We took it from an in-person tour to a virtual tour, and I'm gonna shamelessly promote that again for this year. We have another Cool House tour that will be virtual June 13th this year. And since it's virtual, anybody across the state can attend. It's fabulous. We've got 6 really great projects that we're hosting this year. We also secured a large grant from the Meadows Foundation, which is going to help us do the work that we're doing this year. It's a grant to promote community solar, as well as create a very diverse workforce within solar companies. And we started a policy group. It's a new initiative for us. And it's, of course, timely because of the legislative session. And we're tracking some things that are happening within co-ops that are, we're concerned are going to be disincentives for solar. So we're tracking that as well. Next slide, please. So the community solar projects that we're attempting to promote, what we really would like to focus on are creating some carve-outs for low to moderate income homes and community groups. So that's our intention with the grant, as well as I mentioned before, an internship program. Solar Austin, one of our chapters, created a fabulous internship program where they matched minority students, women students, with solar companies in Austin, and we plan to basically replicate that project or those programs across the state in all of our different chapters. We also intend to add 2 new chapters, one in the Valley and one in West Texas, and we are retooling our website. We feel like it's a little outdated. That's, of course, time consuming, but that's something we intend to do. And our policy work. As I mentioned, policy work is new for us, but we're very excited about it, and we're doing some really great things with what's happening during the legislature. It's also my intention to really increase our business membership this year, and again, co-host another virtual tour. So next slide. So our chapters. Our chapters are very different. They all do a wide variety of different things. The North Texas Renewable Energy Group, I just highlighted a few things that they do here. There's not a lot of detail about all the things they do, but some of the highlights of things they do is the NTREG, they host webinars every month. They just finished one on how to make a project more resilient. That of course was based on what just happened with the extreme weather events we just had. And in April, they are going to have one on an architect, or they're going to have an architect present on energy efficient programs, how to design for them. Houston Renewable Energy Group, they were very active in-person meetings, but they've had to go virtual, and pretty much all they're doing this past year was hosting virtual events where they networked about available jobs and how to go about finding them. And Build San Antonio Green, or BSAG, is a nonprofit that focuses on certifying properties, primarily homes, to be LEED certified. But they also do things like they have a solar fest and other things as well. They're very active in our very active chapter. And Solar Austin is, as I mentioned, they have this internship program that they sponsor, which has been very, very successful. And a lot of their time and energy goes towards that. But they also have monthly webinars where they invite, speakers to come and make presentations, which are also really, really great. And Eco El Paso, they recently started a new program where they're locating and giving away free solar energy systems, to nonprofits who own their own buildings. So those are some of the things that some of our chapters are doing. Next slide. The other thing we do is we have a quarterly newsletter. In fact, we're promoting Jason this next quarter, the quarterly newsletter that's coming up. And if you join our mailing list, we'll be happy to include you in those quarterly newsletters. Next. So we also are very active. We have social sites that we really encourage you to follow us on. I mean, we provide really good information on those sites with links to good articles. And again, if you would follow us, we'll be happy to share our information with you. And that's it. Next slide. So this is my contact information. I'm very happy to, if you have a question that comes up for you that you need an answer to and you think I can help you, please reach out to me. I will find you the right resource, the right answer, and the right contact. So thanks, Deb.
Thank you, Pete. And as Pete mentioned, I've recently joined the Texas Solar Energy Society board and have been involved in a few meetings. And I'm really, the takeaway initially is I'm really impressed at the organization itself as an umbrella, but also the activity happening at the local level, the local chapters. It's really amazing to hear firsthand the type of progress that's happening. Very engaged local stakeholders, very engaged local companies. So great resource. And as you're evaluating and moving forward with solar projects, look to Texas to help you do that. And so with that, we're going to kind of move over on the sort of the practitioner side, the mechanics of solar projects, and Jason Pittman, who is very involved in the San Antonio chapter of Texas, which is housed and supported by Bill San Antonio Green, is with us today. So Jason, let me turn the slides over to you and give me a signal and I'll move them forward for you.
Great, thank you, Deb. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good afternoon. Today, I'm going to talk about just the roadmap or the mechanics in terms of how do you adopt community solar. These slides were put together. They're really focused on, let's say, local government officials, property owners, maybe engineers that are reviewing projects. For all the solar, installation companies on. This is probably going to be, a repeat of things that they already know. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So Deb, please advance the slide. So here are just kind of 6 things that we'll talk a little bit about that I've included in this roadmap. Project goals, what's your annual load profile, roof constraints, how much space do you have for a generating asset, local trusted sources that you can reach out to, what the procurement process looks like, and then probably one of the most complicated aspects of going solar is creating a financial model, and what assumptions are actually in that model, and how do you use it to make an informed decision about if this generating asset or this technology is right for you. Okay, Deb, you want me to give you a hand signal or a nod or? So the first, I think this is one of the more important, aspects of a solar project. If you're thinking about solar adoption, really, what are your project goals? Most of our customers kind of fall into 2 different categories. The first one is they're financially driven. They're looking for an investment. They want a return on that investment. Obviously, the quicker the return, the better. And so they want to see, the model needs to be really heavy in the financials. On the other hand, we have corporate clients and they are trying to implement corporate sustainability goals. And really their goal is, how do I reduce our carbon emissions? How do I show corporate headquarters that we're following a corporate sustainability mandate? And so those customers have a different set of questions. And so it's really understanding what your goals are upfront to make sure that your solar partner or your solar provider provides the information that you need to make a good decision. Okay, Deb. Kind of the next in line is really, what does your annual load profile look like? This is very important depending on what market you live in. So for example, the bar graph there shows the annual load for a hotel in San Antonio. It's relatively flat. They have occupancy year round. The air conditioner is always running. This customer wanted 100% offset for the year. However, they were also doing this for financial reasons. And so they wanted to maximize their return on investment. And so what we wanted to show them kind of right off the bat is, if you look at the local net metering program here, you don't get full compensation for excess generation. And the reason that's important is because it will really drag down your ROI number. In this case, the solar is underproducing in the shoulders, right? So that's the kind of winter and fall months, and then it overproduces in the summer. You use the overproduction in the summer to make up for the underproduction in the fall and the winter in order to get that 100% offset for the entire year. However, the overproduction in the summer is only worth 1.6 cents in San Antonio compared to the commercial retail rate, which is closer to 8 cents. And so what that does is you're actually generating energy in the summer that is devalued. And whenever you include that in your long-term financial model, it just drags down the ROI. And so these are the types of things that, if you're a commercial property owner or you're a government official and you're thinking about what your project goals are, make sure you understand what the net metering policies are in your market and what it means to overgenerate or undergenerate. A couple things on the side here. These are some questions to ask. Does 100% offset make sense? It may not, depending on the net metering program in your market. Does that excess generation rate, does it vary from a retail rate? In most cases in Central Texas, it does. Make sure the basis of the design, it really understands what your goals are. In this, if this was a customer that wanted to reduce their carbon footprint, they wanted to maximize the reduction, then this makes sense. Let's see. I think that's it on this one, Deb, if you want to go ahead and jump forward. Next, you need to look at your roof. There's lots of roof constraints, from the orientation. Does it point the right direction? Preferably south in the northern hemisphere. Does east facing roofs, does west facing roof, do they work? What do the obstructions look like? Does it even have to go on the roof? Do you have an opportunity to cover a parking lot? Finally, whenever you decide that the roof is the space that should host your asset, be careful where you put the panels. So this is just a couple of photos. These are systems. I've zoomed into them so you can't really tell where they are, but there's significant panels in the shade. I'm not saying you can't put these panels where they're located previously, but you should have a conversation with the property owner so they understand what this does to the overall production. The panel there on the left, that is being shaded by a really high parapet. The photo there on the right is being shaded by buildings to the south. It has a major impact on production. Okay, Deb. We always recommend that people find a trusted source. Pete mentioned several of them earlier in her presentation. We recommend that you reach out to a nonprofit that's not trying to sell you anything and ask them to point you in the right direction in terms of finding an informed and a qualified solar partner. Local utility companies typically have a list of registered solar contractors. What we recommend for people to do is find that list, ask friends and families, call nonprofits to really narrow it down to a couple, and then reach out to more than one. Okay. And so now you have the list, you've kind of highlighted maybe 3 or 4. What do you do now? We always recommend that you call multiple solar contractors, ask them to come out, look at the site. Hopefully they submit a proposal that is similar so you can actually compare them, check their references, ask about what their options are. You know, is it rooftop? The photo here is a carport project that we have down in San Antonio at Brook City Base. Does the commercial client, do you have available land that could host a ground mount system? You know, do you need to finance these projects? Obviously, PACE is a great resource. Make sure that if make sure if you're financing, you understand all of the fees. Okay. And then the model assumption. So this is where it can get complex if you're not familiar with working with financial models. There's lots of assumptions that you can put in the model that makes the project look great. Tax incentives are available to lower the cost. They really help out in terms of the payback, but there's also other things that you have to look for, like is the rebate taxable income or not? And if it is, depending on when you receive it, make sure that that's included in the model. Does the model have a reasonable energy rate escalation? So what that means is, every year energy rates compound. Is it 1%? Is it 3%? Really ask your utility company what the utility rate escalation, the compound annual growth rate is for that area, and make sure that the model has the right number in it. And then O&M costs is very important. You don't install these assets and just let them sit there. They're not static. They need to be inspected every year. Probably every 10 to 12 years, you may have to replace your inverters. There are probably going to be panels that need to be replaced. Make sure those costs are included in the long-term financial model. Okay. So here, I believe this is the last slide. It's just benefits and risks. There's lots of opportunities associated with distributed energy, mainly solar. Energy offsets and sustainability are easy to understand. It also helps you mitigate your exposure to volatile energy and natural gas markets. And so, as we know from a couple of weeks ago, that's very important. Lots of our commercial customers, they use the solar to differentiate themselves from their local competition. So that could be commercial office buildings, it could be multifamily, it could be anyone that's trying to attract a certain type of tenant or customer. And then obviously resiliency is a big part. Just because you have solar on your roof doesn't mean that it adds resiliency to your property. It has to be designed properly for that to work. And then there's a couple of risks that I've listed here. Underperformance. So we hear from people all the time that have adopted solar, the system is underperforming and they don't know what to do. The ones that are financially motivated, they're obviously concerned because every month or every day that system underperforms, it impacts their return. Roof warranty issues is also a big issue. Just make sure that if you have a warranty on your existing roof, that your roofing contractor is involved, at least inspecting the solar array to make sure that it doesn't impact the warranty. We provide, but we also recommend that people have an annual inspection. You just want to make sure that you don't have any animals living under the panels, that the wires aren't frayed, there wasn't hail damage that was, that wasn't identified. Just to make sure the system is good operating order. And we always provide a production guarantee to our customers. If you're thinking about going solar, we definitely strongly recommend that any company that you buy your system from provides a production guarantee. You need to make sure that your investment's going to work in the years to come. Deb, I think that may be, there we go. That's all.
So we did have a couple of questions come in, and I think maybe we can address at least one of them now. Jason, there's a question for you. Are you finding a greater receptivity for your work post Uri, or I guess a greater level of interest?
Compared to what?
Well, compared to, I guess, pre and post Uri, the winter storm a few weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely. I mean, people are very interested in, keeping their homes warm and their families safe and resiliency. So we're definitely getting a lot of phone calls about that. We try to talk to people about if you want to adopt batteries and storage in the San Antonio market, there's not a time of use rate here. And so you have to go into it understanding that it's not the financial payback may not exist. It's really more about your resiliency. Are you going to use this system maybe, a couple of times a year, or maybe once every couple of years? And if that's something that they're interested in. I have the questions pulled up now. Is that?
Yeah, that was, let's see,
we have a big community solar program in San Antonio. And one thing that, for whatever reason, a lot of our community solar customers ended up not getting their power turned off. And they thought it was because they were community solar customers. Obviously, it has nothing to do with it. It was just kind of luck of the draw. They must have been on a critical circuit or not. But it was interesting that even community solar, folks with their panels off-site thought that the solar was providing a benefit, and unfortunately we had to tell them that it wasn't.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Jason. Had a few more questions come in that are more PACE related, so I'm going to take those at the end after I've covered a few more things which may address these questions in part. So kind of moving back into the PACE eligibility, the types of improvements that are eligible, and this is just a sample list, it's not exclusive, but essentially if it's a project that can reduce energy or water usage or generate energy on site, that is technically a project that is potentially eligible for PACE. There are some financial qualifications. The savings to investment ratio has to be solid. There's a limitation on the loan to value. You don't want to have the value of the loan being more than 25% of the value of the overall value of the property. Some things like that. But from a technical standpoint, these are the types of projects that are eligible, and they're clearly renewable energy systems, distributed generation, even combined heating and power. Things on the customer side of the meter are potentially eligible, as well as on the energy side, a host of things you would imagine, HVAC, boilers, compressed air systems on the industrial side, building envelope improvements, et cetera, and then a whole variety of water as well. The PACE legislation in Texas actually passed really kind of on the heels of the 2010-2011 drought. So water conservation, water management was a big motivation for this. So there's a lot of water opportunities as well. The other thing that, and Jason kind of mentioned this in his presentation on, identifying all costs. Certainly there are in project financing generally. A PACE loan is very much a real estate transaction, so there are also fees that are part of that. As you would imagine. So those costs can actually be financed and are in PACE projects. On the project side, not just the equipment, but a pallet of solar panels arriving on your doorstep doesn't really help you out. They need to be installed. So there may be materials and labor necessary for that. That's clearly eligible. So the install cost of the project, design work, permits and fees, project commissioning, typical all project costs are eligible. And then on the financing side, there's a third-party review requirement under state law. That fee can be included, legal and consulting, lenders fees, program fees, anything else. And so this can be a decision that the owner makes whether they want to, pay for some of these things through other funds or roll this into the financing. But those are options. And again, kind of going back to the cash flow model, the financial impact of PACE and the difference between some financing options. If you look at the link at the bottom, that is an active link on our website that is a calculator, and you can plug in your own variables, your own numbers here, and do these calculations to see how PACE compares to other alternatives. So in this scenario, this is using that very calculator, and it's a $1.1 million efficiency upgrade with projected savings of $125,000 a year. And the assumptions here is that it's a 20-year term at 6% interest. And if you look at the comparisons, the three lines, the self-funded option, that means you've got the 1.1 million of capital available for a project like this. So you go immediately negative because you no longer have that capital available for other projects or for other core mission needs. But then you begin realizing savings day one, and it's a pretty straight line up. So payback there is about 8.5 years. Conventional loan option, typically lender's going to be looking for 20% or so down. So again, that's the capital expenditure to start, and then you begin seeing that line increased with a payback hitting a little bit longer, closer to year 10. And then with PACE financing, the difference here is you start cash flow positive day one, and then you begin realizing your savings through the term. So a useful tool. You can do your own calculations and see how these different financing options compare and which one's the best fit for you. But for longer term, longer lived projects like solar, HVAC, et cetera, that's why PACE was put together for those longer payback projects. The process itself and how the projects work, two sides here. The contractor, the work they do, and then the ITPR, which is an independent third-party reviewer. This is a licensed Texas PE that does basically the quality control work and is there to make sure the project is done in accordance with all of the standards. So in this case, if you follow the flow, the contractor or the owner can do this upfront energy or water analysis. There's a template form we use for that, so there's standardization. Then the independent third-party reviewer does this savings review. It's mostly a desk review. They probably also, since ultimately they're going to put their PE stamp on it, may want to go to the site and assess kind of the before conditions. Then the project moves into construction, and then it goes for an installation verification. Again, the same independent third-party reviewer is there to ensure the project was installed and is operating as it was intended. So that's a sort of the quick version of the process for PACE projects. So let's look at some case studies involving solar. And again, these are Texas projects. As we've seen, urban and rural across the state, some of the I think it was the pie chart earlier showed the breakout by end-use sector. So office, mixed use, nonprofit, hospitality, multifamily, a mix of different project types, energy efficiency, water conservation, DG, rooftop solar, some with resiliency benefits. And then the project size, the range we've seen in Texas from 68,000, sort of at the lowest end. This was a solar project specifically. No other measures as part of that PACE financing scenario, and then up to 24 million, which was the largest. And there actually PACE was just a part of the capital stack. So a developer bought a property, completely gutted and rehabbed, had other financing, but used PACE for the mechanical systems. And all of these have received 100% financing. So the projects themselves, a couple we're going to highlight. At the Elgin General Store, this is a feed store in Elgin, Texas, which is just east of Austin. The owner wanted to add PV. That's all they needed for the facility. They were able to secure grants and incentives through the USDA for a portion of the cost, $31,000, and then also through their their distribution utility Encore, another $38,000. The assessment total here, $120,000 and 26% annual electric savings. So very straightforward single measure project, just adding rooftop PV to an existing building. In Travis County, this is a facility that houses services, support for elderly in the area. There they needed a roof, but they also wanted to incorporate PV. So they did two things. Oftentimes, when you're replacing the roof, one of the things Jason highlighted is there could be restrictions on where you could put rooftop solar. If you're replacing a roof and you're re-insulating it, putting a reflective cool roof membrane, there may be an opportunity to optimize the roof at the time, and as they did here, to include PV mounting racks. And so that's kind of a nice combined opportunity. And the roof and the PV, you don't want to put rooftop PV necessarily on an old roof that's going to need to be replaced in a few years. This is really the right time to do it because the systems will age together. And the assessment total here, $260,000 with savings of $20,000 a year. This project in Waco and the downtown area, where there's been kind of a revitalization, the silos, the Chip and Joanne Gaines project, everything that's going on downtown in Waco. This is a project that involves used ISO shipping containers. It claims to be the largest such project using shipping containers in the U.S. So it's a combination of retail, office, living, and the project needed everything. So the PACE financing paid for the HVAC, the elevator, the motors and controls, which were more efficient than otherwise code would have required, roof insulation, building envelope, plumbing, and solar PV. So here, the assessment about $850,000 with significant electric and water savings projected off of kind of a baseline scenario, which would have been a code compliant minimum building standard. Another one, this is in downtown Dallas, kind of the Deep Ellum area just outside of downtown, an old cotton gin building that a developer purchased and is turning into sort of a multi-use retail, restaurant, et cetera, officing. Again, here, the project needed everything. It needed roofing and windows and mechanical and HVAC. And so all of those things were done, as well as adding rooftop PV. So a $5 million project here, significant electric and water savings. This is kind of a typical 80s building you'd see that, maybe was not built with efficiency in mind initially, and it needed HVAC, new roof, thermostats, and again, a perfect time to incorporate rooftop solar is when you're re-roofing. So PACE can pay for that, can fund that. So I'm going to jump to some follow-up resources now. The Texas Solar Energy Society, and again, these slides will be available later, and we'll also have this recorded. Great resource, as Pete mentioned and covered. It's also an access point to the local and regional chapters of Texas that have activities and events and training and so forth going on all the time. Jason's company, Go Smart Solar, is here. You can see the types of projects that they've been involved in and the types of things you're seeing solar applied to. Solar really, I think, even 5 years ago was, you might see projects as kind of one-off, but it is become very mainstream. Almost every owner in a new project is trying to figure out, how can I incorporate solar in a retrofit situation? Owners are trying to figure out, how do I put that on my roof as part of a re-roof? So all sorts of applications. And the costs also of the equipment, the components, has come down considerably. And so in Texas, even though our typical electricity rates are pretty low comparative to, say, California or other places, solar projects pencil out all over the state, and that's something that 5 years ago was more locality by locality. So great opportunities there. Our website, Texas PACE Authority, you can find the technical guidelines for our how the program operates, technical standards for engineers to look at when they're doing the reviews. We also have a list of events and training, including more of these webinars and the past ones that are recorded there. And we're also going to be launching soon sort of a self-paced online training on PACE for contractors. So you can go through that. You can receive a certification that you have been through the training, and when you're talking to customers and clients, you will be you can have that designation. And then the case studies that I covered today are just only a few. So there's many more that you can look at, including, I think, mentioned the first one, which was a nonprofit, a temple in Austin. So lots of resources there. So in summary, we think PACE is a win-win-win, actually two more wins, because there's 5 of these. Property owners receive lower energy bills, greater resiliency, energy independence, efficiency benefits, indoor air quality, property value increases because now these mechanical systems have been refreshed. So for a subsequent buyer in the marketplace, the property is worth more. For contractors, when you're working with an owner and proposing a project, it's usually you hit the wall if there's not available capital to move the project forward, even though it makes sense from all sides. So PACE is an opportunity to address the financing challenges. For lenders, if you're not currently funding PACE projects or working with PACE, this is again kind of a new loan product. It may be something that you want to offer to existing customers, as well as maybe set up a new kind of a PACE vertical. From the state standpoint, the more we can do to reduce demand on the customer side of the meter, the better off we are. As we all saw a month ago, I think had demand not shot up the way that it did at the time when generation was limited, we would have been a lot better off. And then from the community's standpoint, some of the projects that I highlighted, were abandoned buildings, things. So this is a way to sort of re-energize downtown areas, repurpose existing buildings that have great bones but need new HVAC, mechanical lighting, solar projects on the roof. So good opportunity to make those improvements as well. And so that's the end of the presentation. I see we've got quite a few questions, which is great. And also our emails are here. If we don't fully answer the question that you're asking, or if we run out of time, I'll leave this up and please shoot us a direct email. So with that, let me just see what we've got here. On the questions. So one of them, this is from Paresh. In the wake of Uri, which is our winter storm, power resiliency and reliability, top of line and there's renewed interest in distributed energy. Does PACE support multi-site, multi-party microgrid projects? The answer is yes, it can. There can actually be anything behind the meter that impacts electricity consumption on the kWh or demand KW potentially can qualify. So a microgrid project behind the meter could work. Multiple sites, if a project like that at multiple locations is something that the owner wanted, then that could all be rolled into one PACE financing arrangement. We've actually seen that. Simon Properties, large mall owner, I believe had 4 or 5 different PACE projects close at the same time under a single financing agreement in different locations. So that can all be done. We had the question for Jason that you answered already. Next question I see here from Dharma. Speak to the efforts being undertaken to get PACE use available to residential customers. So in Texas, it is only for multifamily 5 units or more, as I'd mentioned. There is I understand there may be some interest in residential, single-family residential, but currently that under state law, that's not eligible. And I have not seen any legislation during this session filed yet to open it to residential, but that may be something that is coming. Question, any special requirements for nonprofits? No. Even the key here is a nonprofit for their property has an account number or a property ID number at the central appraisal district. That's the key thing needed to be able to move forward with PACE financing. So even though the nonprofit does not have a property tax liability and is not taxed, the key is that CAD account, the central appraisal district account. So no special requirements. Next question, had an owner concern over primary lender not liking another lien being created? Yes, in fact, so in Texas, one of the requirements under state law for PACE is that if there is an existing mortgage, that mortgage holder must provide consent for a PACE lien. Understandably, a PACE lien becomes senior, sort of a tax status, even though it's technically not a tax. And so the existing mortgage holder would need to provide consent. And I think about half of our projects in Texas have had existing mortgages, and those lenders have provided consent. So there's a process. Normally, we would need to, talk to the lender to explain to them, the nature of a PACE loan. It's not like a second mortgage. It's a governmental assessment. So it's viewed differently. But yes, certainly we encounter that quite often. Next question, basic information on training. I'm an energy engineer and CEM. Just send me an email and we can connect you. This is on project background and information. What else? Noticed that all the projects we highlighted had solar. That was deliberate. It was not every project we have funded through PACE or seen funded through PACE has solar, but a lot of them do, and more every day. The thing that obviously PACE financing can support as well as solar is battery storage. That is a means of reducing demand on the grid at key times, and without getting into a deep discussion about time-based 4CP pricing and things like that. Anything that can reduce demand and has a financial benefit that can be captured potentially, can be PACE financed. So solar, in addition to solar plus storage on the customer side of the meter, is a great solution. Talked about lender consent already, and potential of examples of using PACE for community solar. So that's actually something that Pete and I have talked about some, and we haven't mapped out clearly how the two could work together, but I think they could in certain situations. With PACE, there is a requirement that is the owner of the property is the one that is making the improvement and agreeing to the assessment. So there may be a mechanism where an owner of the property actually winds up implementing a solar project, and then could be a crediting mechanism for the value of solar or the solar electrons that go out from that. Jason, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Nothing positive.
Yeah.
The 5 megawatt community solar program that we deployed for CPS, obviously it's divided up between residential and commercial customers. None of our commercial customers used PACE.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So community solar, a square peg in a round hole, but there may be some specific installations where that could work. Let's see what else. And that's kind of what we've got. Let me see if there's other things in the chat. We're about at time. I should have mentioned at the outset, but I did not. If you are an engineer and you need a PDU hour for this webinar, please email me and we can send you documentation to support that for Texas licensed engineers. These webinars can be used for those professional development hours. So happy to provide that. Just let me know, and you've got my email there on the screen. And with that, I think we've got everything. We're about at time. I'll just say this, appreciate you all attending. We had good turnout for this today, as well as our presenters, Pete and Jason. Thanks for your time and helping put this together. We will have the webinar recording linked to our YouTube page, as mentioned earlier, and that can all be accessed through the Texas PACE Authority's website. And please join us for the next T5 webinar. And with that, we will end for the day. And again, thanks for your time and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Job. Thank you, everybody.